Potential that exists in our beloved continent. Together, we embark on a new chapter of unity, collaboration, and progress in Africa. And as you all know, Africa is diverse with its cultures. Thank you. Africa, with its diverse cultures, rich resources, and boundless entrepreneurial spirit, presents us with a unique opportunity to grow and prosper. By uniting under a common purpose, we aim to harness this potential by creating a vibrant economic ecosystem that will empower businesses across the continent, regardless of the size of a location. And as you look at the agenda of the speakers that are going to be talking today, it's entities and honorable members that are well poised to take us into the next level. Our signifies not just a change in name, but a it reflects our commitment to embrace of diversity of the African business landscape, and also to be able to create a leveling playing field where businesses from all our corners of a continent can thrive. We stand firm in our belief that when African businesses unite, we can achieve extraordinary things. So in closing, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to all our members, partners, and stakeholders who have supported us in this transition. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to all those who are joining us for the first time today. Your presence here today in testament to the shared vision and unwavering determination that binds us together. When we had the board meeting on Tuesday, you know, when you get that call that says, I hope you are sitting down. And when this was revealed to the board members, thankfully, I was seated at my desk. Mind-blowing and innovative things that we saw. So thank you again for gracing us with your presence. Let us embark on this new chapter with courage, unity, and a renewed sense of purpose. Together, we build an African business community that will not only shape our future for our continent, but to inspire generations to come. Thank you, and may our collective efforts bring us closer to a prosperous Africa.
Another round of applause for Ms. Sibanyoni, ladies and gentlemen. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker needs absolutely no introduction. I'm quite certain he's quite popular in the room, probably the most popular person in this room. A man of many talents, ladies and gentlemen. If I was to go through his resume, we'd be here until tomorrow morning. So I'm going to skim through it very quickly. The founder and president of the African Entrepreneurs Council, a former chairman and secretary general Business Council, director of the Sanlam Investment Private Wealth, and was also a board member of Eskom Holdings. Ladies and gentlemen, a man that has been at the helm of the South African United Business Confederation, the man, the myth, the legend, the current now president of AUBC, Mr. George Sibulela. Please give him a round of applause. Thank you very much, sir.
Can they help me with the mic? Colleagues, can I say thank you for this morning? Before I go to the formalities, because I read a speech that I for today, I thought it's important maybe to break the ice. And the way I want to break the ice, I want to share some of the business and working experiences that I went through. If you don't understand, explain later.
This one, where you want to put it? Here? So,
So it was my first job, and I showed up late for work, and my boss yells at me, and he says, "You should have been here at 8:30." And I then replied, I said, "Why and what happened at 8:30?" So that was the first experience that I went. My interviewer told me that my wage increase to 50K per month will only happen after 6 months. And I told him I'll start then. And I was doing a speech, and somebody had to comment on my speech. He says, "George gave a great 10-minute business speech yesterday. The only problem was it took him an hour to deliver it." That's the challenges we always faced. By the way, I was once fired. I must share this one with you. I was once fired, and I got fired at work, and because my manager said my communication skills were in up to scratch, I really didn't know what to say. So I left. And then he said, "We need somebody for this role who is responsible." I then said, "Not a problem, sir. Every time something went wrong in my old job, my manager told me I was always irresponsible. So which means I qualify for the job." Lastly, we had done such a very brilliant job, and my boss said to us, and it was a number of us, he says, "You all worked really hard this year. I'm giving you all a check for 30,000 rand." And as we were excited celebrating, he then put a disclaimer. He says, "Only if you work same next year, I will sign that 30,000. That's only the sad part. But now, in short, anyway, I know my job is incredibly secured because nobody wants it. And this is the AUBC work. Nobody wants it. I promise you, nobody wants it because it's quite very challenging. And it's challenging because it's not easy to have initiated what we call a policy advocacy organization, and with its own challenges that you go through, both from the community, from government, from media, from everybody. Deputy Minister of Planning, Monetary and Evaluation, Ms. Pinky Kekana, the minister that I love very much. We're very, very close. And that's probably the reason she decided to come and share a message of wisdom in terms of what we want to achieve. Her Excellency, the High Commissioner of South Africa in Ghana, Grace Mason, she will give a message of support. the board members of SAUBC who have taken the liberty to support our cause right from the beginning. I saw some of them are here. And these are, I call them game changers. When people buy into a vision that was never in existence and they support it in all costs, that's visionary. The distinguished members and partners of South African United Business Confederation, there's no an organization of this nature can be successful without its members. And these members have carried undivided support on our engagement, no critic, nothing. They saw the vision and they believed in the vision, and the vision keeps on getting bigger and bigger. The media, we have a very strong relationship with media across all different platforms, paper, digital, TV, and so on and so on. So we are quite excited, and both local and international, by the way. The partners of SAUBC, the likes of JCDecaux, which is the largest digital or electronic media in the world, Flaxman, the attorney, Skyco, all these good partners who still believe in us, Atec Tiende, I see Simbo is here, they have carried the support continually, and all the new and the most important age managers, and they will give you a message of support. So I want to really recognize you. So today we gather here to celebrate a remarkable moment in the history of our organization, the repositioning of South African United Business Confederation, SAUBC, to now African United Business Confederation, AUBC. We have listened very carefully to the voices of our members, partners, stakeholders, both local and international, and we are thrilled to respond to the popular demand of our expansion beyond the borders of South Africa. In fact, when you travel in many parts of the world, South Africa is this small. The people want to deal with Africa. And that's the reason, if we really want to be in the center of the emancipation of our economy in Africa, this is exactly what we must do. This transformation aligns us with the dynamic and progressive vision of the African Union, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We stand here today proud and resolute to embrace our new identity, which will be unveiled as the African United Business Confederation. We recognize that unity is strength. You remember during the struggle, we used to say an injury to one is an injury to all. That principle talks about unity. And by expanding our reach across the vast continent, African continent, we are presented with unbelievably unprecedented opportunities for growth and development. The easiest place to do business is Africa. Not only South Africa, it's Africa. And the people who are doing business in Africa are not from South Africa. They're from Europe, they're from US, they're from Asia. And if we sit, we are not seen to be in the center of unlocking of these opportunities, then we are doomed. We should not even complain, because the intellectual capital sit with us. We have been inspired by the likes, one of our own, by the way, Mr. Wamkele Mene, the Secretary General of Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement, whose visionary leadership has paved the way for a more integrated and prosperous Africa. I had a meeting with him in Cape Town just in the past month. And I can tell you, he is very disappointed that there's a little interaction of South Africans in making sure that they play a key role in the implementation of this trade agreement, which unlocks large opportunities in Africa. So why are we repositioning? As we all know, that South African United Business Confederation was only founded, by the way, in 2018. And it has grown tremendously, which today represent over 75 members, which are industry sector associations, just by 2018, because of the vision and the objectives that we stand for, which at the time was to ensure that we make and contribute to South Africa to become the best investment destination. Because if we don't do that, we will not be able to deal with all these triple challenges that we talk about. So now we say we want to make Africa to become the best investment destination, because it's got all the right elements to become the best investment destination. And we represent over 1.4 million businesses, which are members of this 79 industry sector associations. And this businesses employs over 6.5 million individuals, and they contribute over 30 billion USD on an export basis in the economy, on the GDP growth. So we are now repositioned. We firmly believe in the power of collective action. With its abundance of resources, which very sadly so, we take these raw minerals, we export them, we then have to buy we have to buy beneficiated products at 5 times the price. But we own the resources. A typical example that we experienced recently, and which we believe is the most powerful example of Africa, what it's supposed to do. Go to Nigeria. That Nigeria used to export a lot of crude. They have a lot of resources of crude. He was exporting a lot of crude. And he decided, no, because we buy a lot of refined product back into Nigeria, but we are exporting the raw material. He set up the largest $9 billion worth of refinery to refine the crude and make sure that a refined product remains in Nigeria. That you can't get better than that. Imagine if every country with the raw material resources was doing that. We would have a progressive Africa. We have a diverse cultures. We're very talented entrepreneurs, highly qualified, who can unlock this potential growth of Africa. So our role as AUBC, in short, is to promote and champion the vision of the Africa Free Trade Agreement. So we are going to be the key implementer of the Africa Free Trade Agreement. We start with the Memorandum of Agreements with Africa Free Trade Agreement. We influence policies in different countries. We engage with leaders of government and make sure that we see progress where there's no progress. And we will also make sure that we become a gateway of investment for Africa. When we travel in many parts of the world, a lot of businesses want to know, how do we go to Africa? How do we access investment in Africa? And we must be that gateway. And we will be that gateway. And we will ensure that we sell Africa as much as we can. The statistics speaks for themselves. Africa's economy has been growing steadily over the years, and with the implementation of the free trade agreement, it is projected to experience even more significant expansion. Let me quote from the African Development Bank. They estimate that this was a report that was issued by African Development Bank that estimates that by 2035, this trade agreement has the potential to increase GDP, the Africa's GDP, by over $1.3 trillion, creating millions of new jobs, lifting millions out of poverty. And these figures highlight the immense possibilities that lies ahead of us. So, therefore, as the African United Business Confederation, our mission is very clear. We have to facilitate, we have to promote, we have to catalyze inclusive economic development across African countries. And we are very much committed to fostering a very enabling environment for businesses, both small, medium, and large. And these businesses must thrive. We will work very closely with governments, policymakers, key stakeholders to create a robust framework that supports entrepreneurship, innovation, and trade across borders. Our vision is to create a vibrant economic system in Africa where businesses can flourish, opportunities abound, prosperity can be shared by all through our collective efforts. And we aim to drive sustainable growth, employment opportunities, and foster social development through the continent. As I close, there's going to be a very interesting presentation in relation to AUBC virtual trade platform. This changes the game of trade. And what you are going to see is you have never seen it anywhere in the world. This platform, I don't want to steal the thunder from the presenters, but the intention is to cover and advance businesses, not only in Africa, but even international. Secondly, we're going to showcase the AUBC TV channel, a digital channel. And the channel is simply not a conventional commercial TV. But what it does is it profiles our industries in Africa, because our industries are not profiled. People don't know our motor industry, manufacturing industry. They don't know. People don't know our industries. I sat on the Council of BRICS. You must see the quality, the level of the quality of the presentation you see from China, from Russia, and so on. But when it comes to us, and that's our DTI, it's DTIC now, with the C at the end. No quality of material. Now we must showcase our information to more than 50 countries at one point in time, so that's how we attract investment. I want to close with this quote. It comes from Dr. Ahmed Hikal, the chairman and the founder of Citadel Capital. And he was talking about Africa. He says, Africa is the story. If you go global, Africa, it is the story. The big story is Africa. The Chinese, Japanese are fighting over Africa. This is a market of multi-billion people, of huge natural resources. And please do not forget that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. George Sibulela there. I mean, it truly is an opportune time for AUBC to align itself with one of the flagship projects of Agenda 2063. And I think at a time, as you mentioned, Mr. Sibulela, with the African Development Bank announcing that Africa's GDP growth is set to grow by 4.8% in the next 2 to 3 years, it certainly is a time for us to be able to put ourselves forward and to ensure that business across Africa is happening at its best potential. Now, what we've all been waiting for, ladies and gentlemen, is the reveal of the new look and feel of the AU Ladies and gentlemen that are still with us in the room, we'd like to take a few photo opportunities with you. So if you could please just make your way to my far left of the room for a quick photo so that we can say that you were here. Thank you.
Chairman of the South African United Nations Confederation.
This networking group has been launched today in Johannesburg. The South African United Business Council is founded by the former Secretary of the Black Business Council, George Sekenema.
the chairman of the South African United Business Confederation.
All right, so the speaker now joined by George Segulela, who is the president and CEO of the South African United Business Confederation, or SAUBC.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, if you can please take your seats. Kindly take your seats, please, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue with our program this morning. All right, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning, a very young lady born and bred in Bela Bela, located in Limpopo. Her first job was a secondary school teacher at Bela Bela High after completing her Bachelor of Arts in Education. And it was her experiences in secondary school that fueled her passion for South Africa's youth, education, as well as her commitment to improving opportunities for young people. But it was her interest in politics that led her to the African National Congress. She was elected to the provincial legislature in 1999, and her political career has flourished ever since. This individual recognizes the vital importance of bridging all divides that continue to exist in South Africa. Her passion, of course, for education and the youth is known throughout her administration. Over and above all, the Deputy Minister prides herself on the commitment and absolute dedication to increasing the profile of women on the African continent. Ladies and gentlemen, an African Union diplomat, the former Secretary General of the Pan-African Women's Organization, and now the current Deputy Minister in the presidency, please may we all take a stand and give a warm welcome to Ms. Pinkike Ghana, our Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much, Katlego. The President of the African United Business Confederation, Mr. George Sibulela, and board members who are here. Let me also recognize all the business leaders who are present, the media houses that are present here. Let me also recognize the sponsors who made this event a success. A happy belated Happy Africa Day to one and all. In this month of the 60th anniversary of the founding of the Organization of African Unity, which is now the AU, let us take a look at what we need to do to establish a continent that we can be proud as leaders of this great Mother Africa to hand over to our children. Africa accounted for only 2.6% of global trade and less than 3% of world GDP in 2021. During the pandemic's shutdown of the global economy due to a narrow corridor of trade exports and poor infrastructure development. Africa, however, can turn to the African Continental Free Trade Area, or the AfCFTA, to accelerate the process of structural transformation, economic development, and sustainable growth. But to do this, we must understand a full potential and pitfalls of the continent that 54 of the 55 signatory member states have to navigate in truly actualizing free trade on the continent to benefit from the predicted $3.6 trillion market. Program Director, in short, the AfCFTA, or the African Continental Free Trade Area, represents the opportunity for Africa as a whole to put ourselves on the journey towards the self-sustainability engendered in Agenda 2063 through a strategic intent of optimizing intra-Africa trade, giving us hope that we could finally be emancipated from the continued poverty that has afflicted the continent for decades beyond the end of colonization, keeping the continent at large bound to former colonizers through aid and neo-colonizers through unstructured investment and unregulated lending. To optimize intra-Africa trade as member state governments, we must create an enabling environment for economic recovery, use our strengths, and identify the opportunities. We must consider what natural resources we have in abundance around us, and our natural talents are, or that which we already have in place to commence our journey of the AFCFTA, whether as Africans in general or South Africans in particular. As an example to illustrate my point, amongst the listed sectors with a very promising growth trajectory is the dynamic, creative, and cultural industries. They call it CCIs, which include the arts, media, and design sectors, along with convergent and emerging digital technologies. The cultural and creative industries has the biggest potential of Africa to boost economic growth and job creation, but it can also deepen the process of economic integration by augmenting cultural convergence and optimize collaboration creative skills. The AU first gave us this insight when, during the height of the worst economic downturn of lockdowns around the world, the theme of the year in 2021 was declared as the AU Year of Arts, Culture, and Heritage, levers for building the Africa we want. So more recently, Program Director, global economists identified the creative and cultural industry as one of the fastest growing sectors in the world. And for Africa, the CCIs being one of our strengths and our opportunities, we must use the power of CCIs as a gateway to catalyze the era of the AFCFTA, which will in turn stimulate unprecedented job creation and higher employment levels. We have been invited to the African United Business Confederation today, and thanks to the President and the board. So this is about looking at the African unity, which was first created by the Organization of African Unity, which we now call the AU, on the back of Ndate Nkrumah and his founding fathers of the post-colonized Africa. Now, identifying sectors is but one aspect. We have much work to do in order to truly unite towards the economic transformation that Africa is capable of. We have to look at what details of intra-African trade looks like. And when you take a magnifying glass to this, it shows us that we must get better as South Africans to truly be part of the African continent. We see ourselves as South Africans as self-sustainable island. And we are not. We have to be part of the continent. The continent is our biggest market. Hear me and hear me carefully. Africa, our African people, our brothers and sisters across the continent, we all call home. These are the people who are our biggest market as South Africa. So in business terms, we talk about market creation, audience targeting, and infrastructure development. Even in the largest corporates, people buy from people. And these people who will have preconceived ideas about South Africans, viewing of South African based, viewing us as South Africans, and based on our history of xenophobia, for example, because many of our African sisters and brothers perceive us to be xenophobic, or vice versa, and how we treat other Africans. And these are the things that will prevent the market creation and targeting an audience that do not like us or do not see us as their brothers and sisters. And this is our reality. So if we don't reach out to our African brothers and sisters, if we are perceived to be xenophobic, anyone will not come and buy from us. No one will want to make business with us. So some of these things are self-inflicted, and we have to see how we deal with them. So we are one nation in this team, and we have to really change that perception, because you can only buy from somebody that you know and somebody that you trust. We focus on global markets as though they buy from us. They do not. We, as the continent of Africa, are some of the Europeans, Americans, and Chinese biggest clients, importing far more than we export. And if we, as Africans ourselves, do not implement and domesticate the AFCFTA ourselves, meaning buying from each other instead of buying elsewhere beyond the continent, then they will do it for us and control us with what is ours. I happen to be in Kenya. I just came a day ago. And the Kenyans were saying we were rated one of the best producers of coffee. The same coffee, other destinations take exactly the Kenyan coffee, they turn it into something else, and it becomes a better coffee than Kenya when the raw material comes from there. It's about mindset, and we have to do something. Why do we keep needing others to do things for Africa? We must get out of the mentality and cycle of aid. We simply must change our narrative and disposition to trade, not aid. If I quote the Rwandan president, His Excellency Paul Kagame, we should trade as Africa. We should not rely on aid. South Africa is the most industrialized nation with infrastructure that could leapfrog the AFCFTA implementation and domestication, not just for ourselves, but for the whole continent. The benefits far outweigh the work and effort we need to put in, which are, amongst others, investment in industrialization, technological advancements, positioning the whole continent as a serious global trade market, provide skills, talent, and knowledge resources to the aging populations of the world. Now, one of the things I picked up from the professors during the Kenyan School of Governance, because it was an exchange program which the National School of Government created just this past week. One old professor who worked with the advisor to the late President Kibaki was saying to us, you know, South Africa, we are worried that you are regressing. And we need to just show you where you come from. During apartheid, because of sanctions, and because you did not have anyone helping you, you manage to industrialize your country. You manage to, whether building the Roy Falk or anything and so on. But today we don't know what's happening with you. And Africa is looking at you to take us elsewhere. Can you go back and industrialize? Because you are exporting all the work by exporting all the raw materials. And you have a huge youth bulge. And these young people are sitting, and it's a ticking time bomb. It's something that we now need to, and everybody comes to Gauteng thinking that there's an opportunity. There are no jobs, there's nothing. But the biggest thing that made China to be where it is, one of the biggest and foremost thing that they focused on was agriculture. And where are our lands? In the rural areas. We now have to go back and make sure that we put our hands on the deck in the farming industry. Because we are importing almost everything. From grain to whatever, we were exposed during the global value chain disruption when Ukraine and Russia war started. We could see that we were even, the sunflower that we are planting in South Africa is not enough to produce cooking oil for all of us. Yet, we were saying Africa has the best weather and the best land to feed the world. But it's vice versa. That we know that the same areas where they are war-torn, it's where we experiencing or are getting our food supply from. So we must wake up. And thanks to AUBC. But as I have identified, okay, thank you for the compliment. But first, we must deal with a few very critical hurdles. And let me just give 3 examples in the interest of time. Firstly, at some point, we need to face up to and make a decision on the free movement protocol. I know Minister Motsoaledi is working very hard on that, which contrary to its name is not free at all, but rather a highly regulated piece of continental policy that will align all member states towards the freedom of movement of the right people for labor, education, and especially trade. Just out of interest, the free movement protocol that we see as a negative because it is not ratified in the European Union is referred to as the 4 freedoms, which came about during their time of what they call the swinging 60s, when the massive power and the currency that we see tangibly today was built, a decade of unprecedented economic growth. And it started with their freedom of movement protocol. So we really need to tackle this matter and support our minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. Very soon, the AFCFTA will be in effect. And people will have to follow their goods and services, which will have free movement, and they won't be able to. We cannot be surprised then. Let it be known that I warned you of this risk here and now today. The free movement of people and goods. Not only for labor, not only for education, but also for trade. We need that. The visa issues. Kenya was happy that at least there's no visa required, and we think we are expanding in South Africa. So not only are we found wanting, even other states in the continent have that challenge. So the second one, proudly African. If we want other Africans to buy our products, it begins in our mind's eye first and foremost. As much as we have subscribed to a proudly South African culture, adoption and encapsulated in our daily narrative, buying proudly African, we must be equally so. On my recent trip to Kenya, it is Kenyan tea, as I said, that is considered the best in the world. Even the British, Chinese, and Indians, who all have massive tea markets, will tell you this. But due to our history, we have other beliefs in this country. How many of us buy the Kenyan tea? How many of us here? So we must start to do that. Proudly African. And that's what I have, at least the best gold Kenya tea. I bought it when I came here. So these are some of the things that we really have to look at. In the same way, we would want our wines as South African and Methode Cape Classic to be recognized as equal, if not better than the French version, and aspire to buy our African peers. We need to truly desire Kenyan tea, Ethiopian coffee, Tanzanian cinnamon and cardamom, and so forth. The day we want, people buy our rooibos. Many. At least that one, from there to there, we can proudly say we drink rooibos. So let's expand. Rooibos, Kenyan tea, Ethiopian coffee, and that's what we need to do. So the day we can find value in our own products from right here on the African continent is the beginning of Africa's rise. The third issue is the inclusion of women and youth in the economic agenda of Africa. One of the stories, you must go into the principles of the AFCFTA. The women's issues in that thing was written in 2 lines. We went to Wamkele, and by then I was the Secretary General of all women in the continent. We said, we can't come as an afterthought. Only 2 lines about women when we are the biggest constituency in the continent. Something must happen. But it also says our heads of states are predominantly men. So they couldn't find a way to coin it nicely. But at least thanks to our presidents, they acceded to that call and they had to do something. So that's why you see that passion. So the inclusion of women and youth in the economic agenda of Africa, this cannot be lip service without substantial action and delivery. Ensuring the financial participation of women and youth in economic activities is a starting point. This is not about appointments without power or without measuring, monitoring, and evaluating the policies of financial inclusion we put in place. And as an example of this, we have a policy in South Africa of 40% procurement for Black women-owned businesses. I'm wearing another cap of being the DPME monitoring and evaluation. Is it happening? I can tell you we are found wanting. When we monitored and evaluated, it was less than 10% when we got into office, just to see whether this is implemented. Noble cause announced by President of this country, Cyril Ramaphosa, 40% for women. Whether you are an SOE, whether you are a department, whether you are a municipality, it is not happening. Mindset. So it must be many voices, one message. We must keep on pushing. They will come to the party, these guys. It is a critical cross-cutting issue for us, but it must be for businesses as well. That's why we want to work with you to say, even in this forum, even in the board that we saw, let's increase participation of women. If we look at the black jackets that are here, and the amount of women, the number of women we are in here, huh? We are an endangered species. AUBC, do the right thing. I want to end with something I want you to think about carefully as we contemplate our African future. Of course, I'm a patron of both the Pan-African Business Women's Association, so you're trailing behind, guys. We have the Pan-African Business Women's Association, which we call it PABWA, and the African Prosperity Fund. And I want to share with you something that our founder, Yavi Madurai, I wish she was here, has spoken about across the length and breadth of this continent. And I quote her, long before the concept of the sisterhood we know today was the greatest economic sisterhood and for direct investment of all time. It was when Mother Nature blessed Mother Africa with riches and resources beyond our wildest imaginations. We have not done our mothers proud with leveraging our inheritance and investment in us. Today, we must change. Mother Africa is calling on her children to change our children's future with the AFCFTA. Will we answer her call? Close quote. It is important that we use this platform, the AFCFTA platform, to really change Africa and make it the best for the future generation. I really want to thank you.
Another round of applause for the Deputy Minister, ladies and gentlemen. Deputy Minister, I was really excited when you mentioned the creative and arts industry. And I think on behalf of all those creatives on social media who were baying for the Minister Naledi Pando's head when she mentioned that the critical skills of science and engineering and everybody had an uproar. On their behalf, I'd like to say thank you. At least you recognize those of the creative industry. But I think also most importantly, Africa has grown so much as a continent. I mean, our commercial real estate market has increased in value 10 times in the last 10 years, with South Africa, Ghana, Angola, and Kenya being seen as some of the best to invest in. So we sure do hope that AUBC will be assisting in making us proudly African and also in ensuring that free movement protocol, especially amongst businesses on the African continent. So thank you so much for your time this morning, Deputy Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is a broadcast and television professional. He has been in the industry for the past 30 years and has shaped his future from the ground up, starting off as a camera operator, a producer, and an executive producer. And his work has now been recognized internationally as well as locally. Today in business, his focus is Southern Africa, its people, its potential, but most importantly, the relationships with the rest of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Brand TV Media Network's next generation projects are focused on industry-specific online content. Now, for that exciting project that the President had alluded to earlier on, we are now going to introduce you to the launch of AUBC TV by Mr. Adolf Spannenberg, the Brand TV CEO.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I was listening to the Deputy Minister's presentation, and one of the things that absolutely stood out from her conversation was the issue of attitude and the issue of mindset. And that's something that really resonates with me on so many different levels. I'd like to draw your attention to this glass of water, which some of you would argue would be half empty or half full, right? So let's just keep that as a consideration for the rest of this conversation. In essence, our focus at Brand TV Media Network is to narrow the focus, to improve the quality and increase the speed of the delivery of what we'd like to term essential, relevant, and authentic content to the addressable audience that you as business wants to focus on. Now, that's a mouthful, but the bottom line is this, is at the end of the day, it all comes down to what story are we telling? What story has Africa been sharing with the rest of the world for so many years? And more importantly, have we been in charge of that story? I don't think we have. I don't think that Africa, South Africa, or any particular part of this continent has really been in charge of ever telling their own story. And I think the time for that has changed. The time is right now for us all to reconsider what our current circumstances, the current technology that's available to us, how we can harness this in order to tell our own story. It's our job to tell better stories, because that's how we grow as a human being. That's how we grow as an industry. That's how we grow the potential of the businesses that we've developed. And I think it's absolutely crucial for each and every one of us to consider how we present our brand, our proposition to an audience, whether that's a hyper-local audience or whether that's a global audience. You know, we, as Brand TV, when we started out, we decided to put our money where our mouth is, and we developed the first online content channel for a city on the African continent called Joburg Today. You can go to it online, on your mobile phone, in fact. It's called joburgtoday.tv. And here's the interesting part of that, is that Joburg Today has an audience of nearly 7.2 million viewers online. That's better than most broadcast channels. The question has to be asked, why? How did that happen? Well, I can keep you here for the better part of this morning to tell you that story, but the bottom line is this. There's a desperate need for people to move beyond their bubble. Each one of us live in a bubble. And there's a desperate need for us all to discover what we don't know. And I can tell you there are people inside of Joburg who don't know Joburg. And that's one of the reasons why we started Joburg Today. But it wasn't just for the people of Joburg. It was very particularly because I come out of what I call the bad news business. I've been in the hard news, television news business for many, many years. And I can tell you, I've been to many countries where people have a very, very strange opinion of Joburg. A very unfair opinion of Joburg, because they don't know Joburg. Now, I've sat down with, I don't know how many different mayors of the city of Joburg in my office, and I tell them and remind them of the fact that, you know, the gold is gone. You know, the guys have taken the gold, it's gone. What's left is the real gold, and that's us, the people. We are the only ones that are left. And if we don't start mining our own gold, which is our story, we are not going to be the beneficiaries of a better future. There is no two ways about that. And we've got great stories to tell. The city of Joburg's got great stories to tell. South Africa's got great stories to tell. And Africa has got incredible stories to tell. But it needs to start telling it. And the only way to do that is to move away from a predominantly earned media opportunity towards an owned media strategy. That's the only way. We cannot rely on mainstream media to tell our story for us, especially if that mainstream media comes from out of country and imposes on the African continent a mindset that is not real to the continent, that is not true, and that is not authentic to the stories that need to be told about what this content is all about and what it has to offer. And the fact of the matter is, the gold of this continent is its people at the end of the day. That's the real resource we have here. It's our people. How we harness our storytelling is going to be the critical differentiator in how our future is shaped. And us at Brand TV intend to be part of that capacity building to tell our own story by means of developing online content channel solutions that allows the private sector as well as the public sector to start telling its story more effectively, more efficiently, in what we now all understand as a content-first world that we are living in. More so, a mobile content-first world. Linear broadcasting, as we know it, is quite limiting. And its challenges has been highlighted in the last couple of years by what's happening in the social media environment, because social media is what's available on your mobile device. But what happens when you as an industry sector needs to start engaging your addressable audience? You have to have the capability, the capacity to harness your storytelling into a solution that can be delivered directly to the IP address associated with a mobile phone. That's the future of how you are going to engage your addressable audience. But in order to do so, you have to have your ducks in a row. You have to have the capability to produce that content, package that content, and make it consumable in an environment where your content, your story, has to be consumed in some very specific bite-sized formats. Those bite-sized formats have been determined largely by what social media has been able to educate us on. You know, if you tell a story in Facebook and you tell a story on TikTok and you tell a story on mainstream media, on radio, or whether you just do a little video capture at home and you're telling a story as a CEO, oh, I'm here, I'm doing this, and you know, this is important to my employees. That's all storytelling, folks. But how do you harness the power of storytelling in the world of commerce? Well, Brand TV has embarked on a process of creating a mechanism to do just that. We are focusing on industry sectors in particular. And again, we started the process by putting our money where our mouth is. We launched a 36-month initial benchmarking exercise in an industry sector which I know particularly well, which is the aerospace industry. I'm going to ask the folks at the back, Aerospace Africa TV, before we get to AUBC. Aerospace Africa TV was a benchmarking exercise we created for 36 months. And I'm going to give you some facts and figures because that's going to underpin exactly what AUBC TV is going to do. Can you just bring up the Aerospace Africa TV platform for us? There we go. You can just press the play button there for us at the bottom. Yeah. Otherwise, just refresh if you need to. Maybe it just got stuck on the... Yeah, you can just press play.
Not only South Africa, from a domestic point of view, but the neighboring countries as well. The SADC region in particular is our domain. It's not limited. If you're a customer, you want to travel, let's say, from Rome, and you want to go to a destination like a game reserve, Edward Street. It enables you to book a ticket from Rome via Doha on Qatar, from Doha to Johannesburg on Qatar.
Okay. Could I ask you just to go to the menu, just touch on the screen for us? Okay. You just stop the, just pause that. Now, this is a platform in which the aerospace industry is being served. Now, I want to tell you a little backstory to this quickly, very quickly. So when we started the exercise and looked at the aerospace industry, the bottom line was the aerospace industry was served by 4 magazines. Those 4 magazines have technically become catalogs for adverts. What was clearly lacking was good narrative that supported the aerospace conversation on a local and an international level. Now, to do that, we automatically said, well, fine, let's develop an online content channel, but let's also segment the audience offering for the aerospace industry. So when we started off, we said, okay, fine, how many people are we serving? According to the magazines that were published out there, there's 475,000 readers. That's what they were doing. We launched Aerospace Africa TV. We created audience segments which covered a weekly news bulletin, which covered a fixed wing section. Could you just click on fixed wing there for us? Fixed wing, a rotor section which was dedicated to the fixed wing or the helicopter narrative within the industry. In other words, now we're even narrowing the conversation down to that sector. Just click on the helicopter section there for us. Yeah, just press play. Okay. And you can go in and you can tap directly into a live stream on each one of these channels that would give you what's happening in that narrative. Or you had the option, if you can just click on the menu for us again. Just go down to the bottom left, just to the left of that. You'll see those 9 little blocks there. Just click on that for us. The 9 little blocks. Yeah. Click on that. Okay. Just go back onto Rotor for us, please. Get back onto Rotor. Just go to fixed wing for us. Yeah, and the 9 blocks on the fixed wing for us. Right. Click on wings. Just click on wings. Yeah, click on this here. It's fine. Each one of those. It's fine. The next one. Sorry, just stop that there. I just wanted to take you back to the menu option. I just want to show you. Just go back onto that 9 blocks for us. Click on wings. Click. Okay. Now you can go back and you can view content over that period of time and select any content asset that was relevant to that particular channel that was dedicated to the wings conversation, fixed wing conversation. Now, the point I'm raising here is that segmentation of audiences is becoming so important. So if you're in an industry sector and you want to drill down into what that industry sector has to offer, you need to understand what the segments are, and you need to serve content which is directly delivered to that segmented audience. And that's the secret today in terms of harnessing the power of the audience that is addressable to the issues that you are covering. And that's the one thing that can only be done in the online space. Why? Because we're also living in a data-first world. We're living in a world where the data that we capture on the people engaging with this content is now very specific to this particular audience segment. And that data becomes extremely important when it comes to how you make the decision of how your business grows, where it starts focusing its energy. That's what's important, is to be sure that you don't just put content out there, but you are able to extract the data associated with what that content can deliver. Now, that is the most important thing about what brand TV does. It doesn't just deliver to an addressable audience, but it extracts the data associated with that audience and provides real-time feedback to the industry sector, who now needs to start looking at listening to its audience. And that's a very, very powerful tool. Now, if I can ask you just to go back to the AUBC TV presentation. We prepared for AUBC a pilot episode of the AUBC weekly bulletin, which is proposed, which will drill down essentially into industry sectors down the line. And the opportunity that exists there is that industry sectors will now have the opportunity to start focusing on their narrative in a space where it is not about the glass half empty, which is predominantly the narrative which has been shared by mainstream media, but has the ability to tell their own story on their terms and get that content delivered directly to their addressable audience. At the same time, getting the opportunity of extracting the data associated with the audience engagement on that content. So without any further ado, please have a look at AUBC TV.
The mandate of the AUBC is to promote business. This is something that AUBC hopes to do with this channel, AUBC TV. I caught up with the president.
We realized it was really only represented by CEOs of business companies. And we thought in our mind, what really is the primary objective of this visit or this trade mission, particularly in a forum as big as Davos. And we understood that our role as delegates is to ensure that we position South Africa in the global space in different aspects of opportunities, to create opportunities for the country, whether in business, in social, and so on, or cultural, and so on. But what also came to our mind was that the CEOs of listed companies really have simple interests. One is to grow the value of the shareholders in their companies. Secondly, is for them to there's no doubt, because they make money from the bonuses of based on the results they achieve. But then we also came to conclusion that the representation of businesses in South Africa is not only led by CEOs, it must be led by CEOs of industry sector associations, which were not represented in that delegation. But this is not only Davos, by the way, because some of us have been to more than 70 countries with different presidents, different ministers, on trade missions, on BRICS, business forums, and so on. When we interact with other countries, they come with many leaders of different industry sectors to present sectors of industry for countries. And that is an interest that we have, because our delegation...
I'm just going to ask the team to stop this for us. They've actually just played the wrong one. This was the intro by George Sebulela. We would like to show you the actual pilot episode. Are you guys ready to share that with us? The pilot episode is a weekly contribution. And in this weekly contribution, it creates an environment in which industry sectors will be showcased, and where leading opinions within those industry sectors will be given the opportunity to take the stage and talk about what is current, what is valuable, and what their propositions are to market. Are we ready, guys?
The African United Business Confederation is leading the way to narrow the focus, improve the quality, and increase the speed of essential, relevant, and authentic content that promotes and stimulates growth. In this week's program, we focus on franchising and its future. We check in with commercial aviation, which is a key catalyst for growth. But first, the leader in logistics on the African continent has a new name, Africa Global Logistics. Our cameras were there to witness the global reveal of this new brand.
Bolloré Africa Logistics unveiled its new brand. The company will now operate under the name Africa Global Logistics. AGL affirms its ambition with the MSC Group to continue and grow its contribution to sustainable transformation of Africa and emerging markets. with customized, innovative, global logistics solutions.
The embassy family are driven with a passion for the African continent. They are already the single biggest shipping line in the world, and I think almost the biggest shipping line on the African continent. So if you combine what we have from terminals, railways, and logistics, this combination can be very, very strong. Also, they're committed to growing business further with some very significant investments, both in ports, possibly railways. We're looking at Walvis Bay actually at the moment as well. Some changes within how we operate. So I think where we've been a little bit conservative over the last few years in Bolloré because of this sale, we'll now be released from that and to grow offices more across the country.
If you look at the cost of logistics in Africa, the fact that it is far higher than it is in other emerging markets and definitely in the developed world, then this kind of marriage of the world's largest shipping line with Africa's largest freight and logistics company, it certainly does up the ante, and it brings in those economies of scale that are required to make a more seamless operating environment.
It's vitally important to the growth of Africa to have inter-Africa trade. Now, it's been talked about for years. The example that we're looking at in conjunction with embassy is how to run the vessels through different ports, through feeder vessels, through main hubs, and because we control, particularly on the west coast, so many of the ports, and we have so much at our disposal in terms of vessels, port operations, we think that we can increase the inter-Africa trade. That's on one way. The other inter-Africa trade is that we have a very good and strong relationship with COMESA, who are following our actions very closely, certainly competitively to ensure that we apply by the rules that they governed us with this particular deal. And we're going to push that because for Africa to grow, it has to trade better with each other. We know there are problems. We can scratch our head and we never get to the answer, but we think we can open up both on the hinterland and on the seaside those opportunities.
I think the timing is particularly good. You know, the African Continental Free Trade Area is now in a trial phase. That's been signed up to by 54 of the 55 countries in Africa. You are going to start seeing more intra-African trade. And I think just the last few years, when we've witnessed the global disruptions and dislocations, the desire of African governments and African businesses to operate more seamlessly within Africa and with their partners outside of Africa. This really is a great development to enhance that at this stage and to grow with the fastest growing young population in the world, some of the fastest growing economies in the world, and it places African global logistics right at the center.
You belong to this.
All right. So at this point, what I'm going to suggest to you is that, thank you very much. You know, you can't tell good stories unless you've got good content. Let me just tell you that, just to start off with, right? I reiterate, people don't know the story of Africa. I can assure you, as a content producer over the last 30 years, I've had the very, very unique opportunity, which I don't think too many people can put down. I've been to every single country in this continent, including the newest one, South Sudan. In fact, I was there to produce a documentary for the United Nations on the independence of South Sudan. I tell you that not to impress you. I tell you that because it's only when you've had the opportunity to see this continent. And can I just take a quick sidebar? I just have to tell you guys this. You know, there's a book that I have that I love giving people. I don't know, George, if I've actually given you one where you've come to my office, but there's a book that I love giving to people. It's a book by the author by the name of John Reeder. It's called Africa, Biography of a Continent. I suggest everybody in this room make a note of that book. It's worth the money. It is worth the time, and it should not stay on your bedside table. Once you've read it, I want to make a suggestion that you give it to somebody who you think would benefit from that book. People need to understand what this continent is all about. And you can only do so once you understand what the history of the continent is all about. Guys, I say again, you cannot produce good content unless you have good content. We've got great stories on this continent. In that part of the program you saw the initial part in which we just showcased the fantastic story around Bolloré, which had a name change. Could we just go back there? We don't have to play the audio loud, but after that segment, you would then see leading opinion interviews that would be done by people within different industry sectors. In this particular instance, we had from the world of here we go. You just play a little segment there for us. Fantastic interview that talks about the franchising environment, and a leading opinion interview, which was, I think, perhaps one of the most realistic interviews I've heard in a long time around the opportunities that exist and the future of the franchising environment, not just in South Africa, but on the continent for that matter. These interviews are really, really important. And this is not the kind of interview, by the way, that you'll see in mainstream media. Mainstream media just does not provide for these kind of opportunities. And that's exactly what AUBC TV will do, is create a platform and create an opportunity for industry sectors to really come and present their proposition on every level, whether it's showcasing a new brand, whether it's showcasing a facility, whether it's showcasing a possibility around a new trade zone, or whether it's having a leading opinion interview that really unpacks the key issues and opportunities that exist within that industry sector. You just don't get that kind of engagement in mainstream media paid for opportunities or earned media opportunities. This is an owned media strategy that is really designed to create those opportunities for people who need to unpack what their propositions are and present that to an addressable audience to whom this information is actually relevant. Could I ask you just to scroll down a little bit further there? We also touched in this particular bulletin, I think, just furthermore to the next speaker, where we touched on, I think it was commercial aviation, if it was, yeah. Yeah, you can just start there. That's absolutely fine. Yeah. Here's another speaker, leading opinion, heads up Commercial Aviation Association South Africa, talking about what the challenges are in the commercial aviation sector now coming out of the pandemic phase, and growing that particular sector, and how important that sector obviously is for business on this continent. I mean, the charter environment is extremely important for that environment. The ability to move people and goods becomes an absolute pillar, for industry to function. Very, very importantly, again, it's not the kind of opportunity that is given in a mainstream media interview on radio or on television. That's why AUBC TV will be able to step into a void of information which currently exists, providing an opportunity for industry sectors to really drill down to what's important to them, but more importantly, make that information available and sent directly to your addressable audience. Now, I had a very interesting little chat earlier on with one of my colleagues here at the table, Mr. Beck, who asked me from Intersec, who asked me the question, well, how do you get the content to audiences? And I said, well, it's actually quite easy. What people don't understand about the digital world is that you as a brand already know who your audience is. All we need is to extract the information on your existing database and provide good quality content directly to that audience. What will that audience do? It's like when you have a great story. If you've got a great story that you tell somebody, they will share it, but they will share it only with people who they think to whom that information is relevant. And that's the key. This is not general audience stuff we're talking about here. This is niche market audiences. But these are people who need to understand what is really happening on the ground with regards to everything that impacts on doing business in a particular region. And I'm not just talking about sales point. I'm talking about the culture. You touched on it, Deputy Minister. You touched on the fact that people needed to understand culture of the environment in which they're functioning. People need to understand what the environment looks like, what it sounds like, even what it tastes like. Talking about the local food, talking about the little stories that make up the overall opportunity that exists in a particular area. You need to have a hyper-local focus with a global attitude. And that's what we believe at Brand TV. And more importantly, that's what we are introducing with AUBC TV, with AUBC in the format of AUBC TV. I want to leave you with this thought. It's a quote by a gentleman who initiated perhaps one of the most important magazines I think that was ever created in this world. It has shaped my life tremendously, and it simply says, "The mind must see to believe." This is a quote by Gilbert H. Grosvenor, and he was the man who started the National Geographic magazine. I think it's an important quote. It's certainly one that shaped my life and has focused my endeavor. The mind must see to believe. And I think that is very true of Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adolf Spannenberg. It's very good to see that people will be able to have access, like you say, to very niche content, but also content that truly is valuable and is needed for those that are doing business across the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, we are running out of time, so I am going to humbly ask the following speakers to try and rush through their presentations, but most importantly, to give us the true essence of what it is that they'll be sharing with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker has been a director of numerous companies involved in sustainable infrastructure solutions. He has more than 30 years of leadership and executive management experience in the Middle East, in Europe, as well as in Africa. He's the founder and member director of the continent's first 3D fully immersive digital trade platform, Tradeverse, formed and launched in November of 2021. This is a 3D digital trade and exhibitions metaverse. Here to speak to us about the launch of AUBC Virtual Trade, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dave Reddy.
I'm giving myself a very short time. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Deputy Minister, Monitoring and Evaluation in the Office of the Presidency, President George Sebulela, my colleague, partner, honored guests, I'm humbled to be here and also excited to be here. Today we launch officially under the AUBC brand, the AUBC Trade Platform. This has been a platform that we started with the then SAUBC in November 2021, launched officially at the Intra-Africa Trade Fair in 2021, and was the first virtual trade city trade platform based on a gaming platform, fully 3D immersive experience on the continent. Many others came after us, but we kept quiet because we had a gem in our hands. You've heard from a number of people today. A number of our speakers talked on many themes, and there's a common theme going through all of us, starting from the President's launch of AUBC, Deputy Minister's speech talking about 3 sectors, and you'll see that the core of what we are driving out of this platform is integrating trade, infusing the principles, the basis, the activities around AFCFTA to ensure that trade activation activates the economic development, the emancipation of the people of Africa into the economic mainstream. And I'm proud to say that the AUBC Trade Platform will enable AUBC to be an active part of the AFCFTA's continued growing platform development of free trade. In our presentation, I talk about an Africa reimagined. And Africa reimagined is already imagined in the AFCFTA, in the AUBC vision and mission statement. We have to grow together. And in growing together, the actual gems and the resources that we have in Africa is not underground, is not growing from underground. It is actually us, our people. You've heard it said a number of times today. The true gems of our continent are our people. Our youthful population is what's going to drive the impetus around the free trade area. So let's use those resources, enable trade, infuse common cultures, and grow from that value. Deputy Minister, you spoke about culture, and I'll talk about it in a short while. It is one of the activation platforms for us. Africa Rising. All tech industries project their businesses around the pizza. Yeah? Our various slices of our pizza is our 3D trade platform, fully gamified, high-tech, futuristic, enabling people to participate in a virtual environment in what we call the metaverse, or our version of it is the tradeverse. Directly linked to aggregated business marketplaces, B2B marketplaces, B2C marketplaces, linking businesses that are trading in various parts of the continent, in various countries through one platform, yeah, in a multidimensional environment, right, that gives them a uniqueness in each country. So we will have a trade city for each country that has its own unique brand, look and feel. That then enables us to trade freely through the borderless environment of the AFCFTA. Despite all the challenges, Madam, you mentioned about earlier in terms of enabling and activating the AFCFTA, we have to ride through those. We have to take our time to develop our systems, platforms, and enablers to make that possible. And one of those is a ubiquitous platform like the AUBC trade platform to enable trade to happen freely, to enable the movement of resources and skills across borders, utilizing the likes of a trade platform. Trade financing, trade enablement are key to all of this. Sector enablement. Each of the sectors of our economic participation, agri, finance, mining, all the areas, arts and culture, will be catered for in our platform. What is this digital centers? As the world moves to a more service-oriented trade environment, we need to have our population, especially our young population, focused on skilling themselves in an area of digital transformation. The digital workers of tomorrow are the drivers of free trade on platforms like these. So we have to take advantage of the fact that our youthful population are ready to work in an environment that is digitally infused in trade. What's enabled that? These things, the use of cell phone technology, digital banking on mobile platforms were taken up first on our continent as the driver for economic participation. M-Pesa. You go to the US when you talk about digital currency and they have no idea that it actually was quite widely used in East Africa as a starting point. So that is what these platforms are about. Next slide, please. So the new world of trade has arrived. You will have heard from George Sebulela when he talks in all of his speeches that AUBC is enabling a